We have found ourselves in the romantic season of the year. This week culminates in Valentine's Day, and even for someone like me who is incredibly single and alone, I'm still getting into the holiday season. And one way to do this is by looking at some romantic musicals. There's so many. The love story is such an iconic staple of musical theatre, but with so many romantic musicals, this does beg the question, the question we were always going to ask. What is the best romantic musical of all time? There's so many. How are we going to decide? Oh, wait, we can do this. Welcome back to the Versus Bracket, the series where we take a bunch of musicals, songs, musical theatre related things, and we versus them 1v1 to find my winner. And today we are going to battle 32 different romantic musicals. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do versus brackets and rankings, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. But let's delve deeper into this bracket. Now, I should probably explain my criteria for this because, romantic musical is a little bit vague in its descriptor, and I've already done a bracket on specific couples. So what do I mean by this? I am going to be speaking specifically about the musicals in this video. I have picked musicals with strong romantic plot points, and I've shortlisted with a few specific criteria. Number one, I have to have seen it. I'm going to be speaking in detail about the musical itself and in detail about the main love story within it. So if I haven't seen it, I can't really speak about it very fairly, can I? This does sadly put us in a place where we've got a lot more modern musicals on here than some more classic ones, because there's a lot of really great love story musicals that, we haven't seen in London for a while, or I haven't been able to watch them. Or they have a pro shot, but one of the cast members in it is not great. So there's a lot of really iconic ones I've had to leave out. Stuff like Brigadoon, The Notebook, Once, Big Fish, Me and My Girl, On the Town, She Loves Me. But there is still time in the future that we could come back to this bracket and add some of these musicals in. Criteria number 2 is what I'm specifically dubbing as a romantic musical. If I could describe the plot of the musical without touching the actual lead romantic plot point, it did not count. Examples of this, I've included something like Amelie. Amelie, I feel like, is close to being able to be described without the plot point of the romance, but I feel like the musical culminates towards that so much that it feels like it's wrong not to include it. Versus something like Legally Blonde. Yes, the relationship between Elle and Emmett is very evident throughout the musical. Obviously, Elwood's intentions start off romantic, but I feel like you can describe a lot of Legally Blonde's plot without the main romance. And also, if we're being technical about it, the main romance in Legally Blonde is not the one that you will describe through the plot synopsis. So Legally Blonde finds itself off this list. With that said, we have got 32 musicals to go through, versus them one by one, and I've put them into a random order, and let's start. I think people are going to be a little bit mad at me with this first pairing, because, I've left off things like Big Fish, I've left off Brigadoon, I've left off some really iconic musical romances, and because I need a 32 that I've seen, and because I couldn't argue against it, it fit every single criteria, Shrek is on this list. Yep, Shrek the musical. I mean, it's a cute love story, and it's up against Guys and Dolls. Now, in a lot of these, we're actually going to be speaking about just one romance, because I'm focusing mainly on the main romance in the musical. But Guys and Dolls is a rare case where I feel like it balances its time so evenly between the two main romances that I feel like they're both kind of in good stead to be talked about together. And those are the relationships of Nathan and Adelaide, and Sarah and Sky. And I think Guys and Dolls, as a classic musical, is everything you want from a musical comedy romance. And I feel like these two plot beats kind of balance each other out in a way, because you have Sky and Sarah's kind of slow burn relationship that's taken a lot more seriously in the musical. You can then have the contrast to Nathan and Adelaide, who as a pair are an absolute mess. but somehow they're just so gravitated towards each other that it's really endearing to watch. I think with this, you get the best of both worlds. You get to see these two very different romances blossom throughout the musical. And I think each of them are so characterful. It's so fun to watch. And speaking on the other criteria that we're looking at, because we're going to look at the romances and also the quality of the general musical itself, Guys and Dolls is just full of bops. I mean, so many of the songs have just lasted. They are some of the most iconic music theatre songs of all time. I mean, Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat, Marry the Man Today. I think a lot of the romantic songs in here are the ones that you remember. And I think there's so much beauty in a song like Never Been in Love Before. I think there's so much comedy and it's so fun to see things like Adelaide's Lament and Sue Me. These clashes and these moments, these ups and downs in the relationships. We may notice that I have not spoken about Shrek yet, and I've spent like 5 full minutes speaking about Guys and Dolls. What I will say for Shrek is that, you know, when translating the film, I do think the relationship between Shrek and Fiona is one of the best things about the musical. I think they capture a lot of that. Do I like the songs that they have to capture that? Not all of them, but it's undeniable that this couple is perfect for each other, even if, you know, the way they show that is a song about farting. But okay, sure. It's Shrek the Musical. We're not looking for highbrow here. But it's been saddled against a very hard competitor at the start. I think Guys and Dolls is likely going to get very far into this bracket and takes its first step here with its first win. Next up, we have Moulin Rouge versus Beauty and the Beast. This is difficult. Oh, because I love like the bohemian love story of Moulin Rouge. I love that slow burn. I love like the love triangle that musical presents with the Duke as well. Satine's kind of push and pull, her sickness, and like the dedication from Christian. Like, man is obsessed. I feel like it's a great love story and a tragic one. You'll see that throughout this list that we don't just have like very solid romances. We don't have perfect romances here. Some of these end in failure. Some of these end in them splitting up. Some of these end with a little bit of ambiguity. But you've got Beauty and the Beast. And if you want a great love story, you'll look to your fairy tales. Except Shrek. But I mean, that was a parody. But nonetheless, I don't think Shrek gave this a good start. Shush. But I don't think anyone does love stories like Disney. And like their adaptations of these fairy tales. Beauty and the Beast, I think, is still, while I don't love the musical version as much as I love the film, and I don't think it's the strongest adaptation that Disney has done with their Disney theatricals, I do think the love story in Beauty and the Beast is the selling point. That kind of enemies to lovers kind of story is very well captured for Beauty and the Beast. I mean, people often say it's Stockholm Syndrome, but we can ignore that. But as you start to learn more about the Beast, you start to see him open up, you start to see Belle changing his mind in a lot of places. This is difficult because I really do like both. But if you push me on the quality of the musical, I do think these are quite on par with each other. With probably Moulin Rouge coming out just on top. But if we're speaking about the romance side of it, I do think Beauty and the Beast might take this one for me. Next up, it was really annoying, right? Because I didn't want this to just be all straight couples, okay? I think it's a lot more common to see queer characters as the supporting roles. Think of Rent, think of & Juliet. And there's very few examples that I could pull out that fit the criteria. Something like A New Brain does have a leading queer relationship. But, you know, when you think about the plot of the musical, it's not really about that relationship as much as it is about Gordon's actual medical journey and his relationship with songwriting. So when we go through this list, there's like three musicals with non-straight relationships, and it's sad, but we have our first pairing here, which is La Cage aux Folles. This one is also kind of a technicality because I think the musical definitely balances the plot of, you know, the push and pull between his son and his lover. But I feel like a lot of the conflicts in the musical are very much focused on his relationship with Albin. So yeah, sure, let's go with it. But it's up against West Side Story, one of the most iconic musical romances of all time. Can I make an argument for La Cage here? That is going to be a difficult case. Now, if you don't know La Cage aux Folles and you've seen the Addams Family musical, you have seen La Cage aux Folles. It is literally the same plot, right? It is a man caught in the middle between his child's demands and the demands of his partner. While in Alan's family this focuses on a secret, Lacage instead focuses on the son trying to soften and lessen the queerness of his family. And this inner conflict that Georges has between showing who he is, showing his love and dedication for his husband, but also that love and respect for his son. And understanding that he is in love. And this conflict is so thoroughly addressed for the musical, this rocky nature to the relationship as Georges struggles with this, as he makes the wrong decisions, as he really upsets Albin, leading to the end of Act 1 number that has become one of the most iconic musical theatre songs of all time, I Am What I Am. Just his absolutely iconic queer declaration. So I have a lot of love for Lacage. I have a lot of love for that relationship and how it grows and ebbs and flows through that musical and how the conflict tests them. And then there's West Side Story as well, which I think people will be very mad if I don't push through. But if I don't push it through, I think it's because of how much that relationship is tested in Lacage. Obviously, West Side Story, it's Romeo and Juliet story. It's, you know, two people who are destined not to be together, but finding love. In Romeo and Juliet, it's feuding families. In West Side Story, it's the feuding gangs. And I think if we're going to speak about quality in musical, because that's like, that is another criteria. I do think West Side Story is a stronger musical when you look at the whole thing. The quality, the writing, the lyrics, the music, it is stunning. And I think, you know, a relationship like Maria and Tony is so beautiful to watch. And this is why it's tough, because I think both of these deserve to go through. And it's not fair that this is first round. And I know the right decision is probably West Side Story. West Side Story is more iconic, but I can't ignore my love for Lacage. The tragedy of West Side Story and the beauty of that, and that moment at the end, Maria's reaction to that whole situation is heartbreaking. Can I come back to it? I don't want to do it now. Can we just move on? Can we just send them both through? No, I've got to make a snap decision. And that's the thing, I'm just gonna have to go with my gut and whatever my gut's telling me and make it snap in the second. And I am going to say West Side Story. I think that is the right way to go. While I love Lacage, and I think what I'm looking for in a romantic relationship is probably something a bit more like that. And obviously I attach a lot more to the queer themes of Lacage. We're speaking a lot about romances here, and we're speaking about quality of the musical, and when I balance those two in my head, it's so close. It's so unbelievably close. And I know that I want to send Lacage through, but the right decision here is probably West Side Story, and that hurts. Next up, we have Sunset Boulevard versus Ghost. Ghost is lovely. Actually, I watched Ghost in concert. It was my first experience of it. And I think it is a very beautiful story. You know, I think it tackles a lot of these really interesting things about grief and loss and love, and, you know, that ethereal nature to it makes it a really engaging love story throughout. I think it did take me a little bit of time to really click with that relationship and warm up to them as a couple, which is ironic because one of them is dead. It's not really spoilers. It's called Ghost. What do you think it's about? I didn't tell you which one. That's still a surprise if you haven't seen Ghost. But, you know, I think a lot of that iconography is from the film as well. I think it adapts that story very well. And ironically, Sunset Boulevard is also adapted from a film. Sunset Boulevard is a very interesting and complex love story, because I think it's interesting to think about how much Joe actually does reciprocate Norma Desmond's feelings towards him. Obviously, you have lyrics in the song Sunset Boulevard, but if I'm honest, I like the lady. I can't help being touched by her folly. I'm gonna half sing that because I can't sing. So, you know, there's at least part of him that maybe loves her in a way. It's definitely very little. It's a very one-sided relationship, we can say. And I like the complexity of that. As I said with Lacage, I like a complex love story. It's great. And this is where it gets difficult, because do you want to go for a very iconic love story that I think does it in an interesting way, or a very complex love story? This time, I think I'll go for complex. I think I would give it to Sunset Boulevard. Next up, we have Once in This Island versus The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. So, Once in This Island is a Little Mermaid story, essentially. It takes the idea. It's about a girl on this island, She was saved by the gods as a child. She lives with her adopted family, and she's longing for like a reason for life. So at that point where she's like, why am I here? What am I meant to be doing? Why did you save me all those years ago? Was that for a reason? And send me that reason, give me that reason. I'm waiting for life to begin. And she finds life when she saves the life of a young boy. A boy that she instantly falls in love with, making a deal with the god of death to exchange her life for his. In similar ways to, you know, how in Little Mermaid, to be together, Ariel sacrifices her voice. And I think there's a lot of complexities about this relationship. There's actually a lot of comparisons as well to something like Miss Saigon. You know, these two people from two different worlds coming together. I mean, actually, if we are literally comparing it to Miss Saigon, both have other lovers as well. And, you know, like, I did not realize how many comparisons you can draw between Once on This Island and Miss Saigon. Wow. And I love the tragedy of the story. I love the relationship they build. I love how it tells you so much about Timoon's character as well. The sacrifice she makes. It's a beautiful story. And it's up against one of my favorite recent musicals, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which also tells a beautiful, tragic, doomed love story. You know, because of how Benjamin ages, that this relationship could never work. And you see this ebb and flow of this relationship, the points where they might get together, the points where they come as a unit, as one, and drift apart again, and come back, and drift apart, and come back. And every time you're longing that this will be the time where it finally works for them. The beauty in these moments where you see them together, you can tell how much of a perfect pair they are, but the universe is screaming at them that this just does not click. It's heartbreaking to watch. I love both of these, but if you're pushing me on it, I would go with Benjamin Button. Maybe it's recency bias, but I want to go with that. I think that is the right answer for me right now. Next up, okay. We have Phantom of the Opera. So we're going to get into some toxic relationships here. And also we have Oklahoma, which the version of Oklahoma I've seen also deals with toxic relationships. So this is a great pairing for the Oklahoma that I know. So as I said, I'm more familiar with the Daniel Fish revival of this, which presents this relationship in a very different way. Curly and Laurie's relationship is very of its time. And honestly, I love a version that explores it in a darker way. I love a version that brings out these moments, because it would feel like this if you were put into positions that Laurie is put into in this musical. You would feel like this. She's so put on the spot. She's so dehumanized. And you know, while I didn't love everything about that version of Oklahoma, some of those big swings did hit. And I think the relationship between Curly and Laurie, and also, you know, how Judge Fry came into that, was really well handled. You know, when we're speaking about romantic musicals, they don't have to be perfect romances. I like a darker side of it. I love a darker tone. And speaking of darker tone, let's look at Phantom, because obviously this is one of the most iconic love triangles of all time. If we're taking the straight version of a love triangle, because I like to think of a love triangle as, you know, a perfect triangle. It's more of a love cone if there's not a line at the bottom as well, which means that all love triangles kind of have to be a little bit fruity. They kind of have to be a little bit queer, because otherwise, where's the line at the bottom? That's not a triangle, that's two angles going up. But for sake of the argument, to be boring, we'll call it a love triangle. And you know, you have the Phantom and Christine, you have this relationship, you have the slow build, you see how toxic the Phantom gets, and it's creepy and interesting. And then you have Raoul as well, and that adds extra dynamics to it. I think, especially with the way the musical presents it, it's really well done. I think definitely the drama between the three of them is the stuff that Phantom handles the best. You know, I go into Phantom and I'm like, this is gonna have great music and it's gonna be camp and I'm gonna love it. Which is stronger? Oh, it's tough. It is tough. But I think, you know, taking quality, taking the relationships, we have two love triangles here, and the one I prefer is probably Phantom, because I'm having to weigh in the other versions of Oklahoma as well, and you know how it was originally written to be. I don't love that as much as I like Daniel Fish's version, and Phantom of the Opera is always toxic and chaotic, and Yeah, let's go with that. Next up, this is going to be really short. We have Grease and the prom. I've gone on record saying I don't really like the main relationship in Grease. I don't really like Danny and Sandy that much. Don't crucify me for this. But I don't know. I always look back on that musical and I'm like, I don't love that relationship. You can love that relationship. Absolutely fine. This is all subjective. And that's the beauty of these brackets. You can do them in the comments down below. Follow along. Pick your winner. But I can tell you right now, my winner's not Danny and Sandy. But, you know, while I'm not the biggest fan of Grease, you do have to give it credit for, you know, how iconic it's become. You're the one that I want, Grease Lightning. There's so many songs in there that, like, if you asked anyone on the street, name 10 musical theatre songs, they would probably give you at least one Grease one in there. But this is up against the prom, which I love how that handles things. This is another one that I almost didn't include because the plot, I almost just described it as, you know, a girl wanting to go to prom and then the Broadway star's coming over because she's not allowed to. But I think even behind that is the reason that she wants to go to prom is because she wants to go with her girlfriend. Her girlfriend who isn't quite ready to reveal herself yet and reveal her sexuality because of her mother. Her mother, who is literally the one leading this charge against Emma in this musical. Emma and Alyssa's relationship is really beautifully explored. And I love how the musical always contrasts this as well. You have all of the other kids at school who are able to make these absolutely giant declarations of love, scream it out from the rooftop. However, the queer kids are always stuck in a corner, hiding. All of these other kids get to have those moments of young love, but because of society and because of the school and the scoreboard, they have to hide who they are and they don't get to have that same experience, which is so sad, especially watching this as a queer person. You know what's winning, right? I don't even need to say it. People are going to be mad, but you know what? I stand by this one. I love how the prom represents Emma and Alyssa. I think that is a beautiful relationship, and it is going through to the next round. And yeah, I just don't really love the messaging of Grease. Yeah, it hasn't aged amazingly well. All right, next up we have Amelie and Waitress. Oh, no! Stop it! Amelie is beautiful, right? Amelie doesn't start looking for love. Amelie starts, you know, doing these little good deeds, and just on her journey, she finds Nino. And you see Amelie kind of withholding herself. You see Amelie not quite ready to open herself up yet. You see Amelie making these random decisions and kind of kicking herself, going, why am I doing this? Because she hasn't really grown up with loads and loads of human connection. She struggles with that a lot. And I think there's a real beauty to how she slowly opens up to Nino and how eventually this pair come together. As well as Amelie just being one of my favorite musicals of all time, which is going to give it a boost, But we haven't spoken about Waitress yet. And I really do like Waitress. Jenna's stuck in a loveless relationship. She knows that she's pregnant and starts an affair with her gynecologist. And I think it's hard, you know, because the musical definitely presents it in a similar way to how the film did originally, that this new pairing is so much better than the pairing that Jenna had. Her husband is abusive, her husband is controlling, and you're longing for her to escape that. And Dr. Perlmutter kind of is that escape. I love both of these. I'm going to have to make a difficult decision here, though. And, you know, I think I'm going to have to take which musical is my favorite to kind of split the difference. And that does mean I would send for Amelie, but you know, hard decision. I could go either way. Next up, we have First Date, which is a great musical. I love First Date. It's one that not many people know. It's never really had a life over here. They did a workshop of it a couple of years ago. They just did a production in Birmingham, if I remember correctly. Like, I think last year. I'd love to see First Date get like a proper off-West End run. I think it could do well. And it's up against, yeah, I told you I've run out of ideas. High School Musical. Yep, it's against High School Musical. Now, at risk of being cancelled by Rachel Reviewed, my good friend who absolutely loves and adores High School Musical, and specifically Zac Efron, I think the love story is okay. You know, Troy and Gabriella? God, I don't even remember. Oh no, this bodes well. All the High School Musical fans are like, oh no, it's not going through, is it? I'm trying to speak about High School Musical, but all I can think of is the memes that were going around a couple of years ago when Troy gives the necklace, and it's like, oh, it's T for Troy. And it was all the memes like, no, it's T for trans rights. It's a very Disney Channel original movie. If you ask me, I prefer the sequel to High School Musical. I still haven't seen the third one. But I do think High School Musical 2 is the stronger of the pairing. I also think it has the better music, and I don't know if that is controversial. I mean, because honestly, yes, you know, we're all in this together as iconic, and is it Soaring, Flying? What's the title of that song? Is it literally called Soaring, Flying? I don't know. It's probably got a much better title than that, but that's what I'm gonna call it right now. Breaking Free! It's called Breaking Free! I remember. See, I did watch this film. You know what? I would discount High School Musical a lot quicker if it wasn't up against First Date. Like, I like First Date as well, but, you know, this is a musical about the starting of a relationship. This is a musical about, like, an if they, won't they kind of thing. There's moments of a date that go well. There's moments of a date that go really badly. There's points where you think that she's going to walk out or he's going to walk out. And also, sadly, it stars Zachary Levi, and he has opinions. You know what? I might just give it to High School Musical because Zachary Levi was in the original cast of First Date, and I don't want to give Zachary Levi any points. Actually, I wouldn't be mad if I did that. No, because the musical is good. It has a lot of great songs. I just wish there was a recording that's not him. See, I don't love High School Musical, but I do admit that the relationship is fun to watch, even if it's very cheesy and could have more detail. And First Date, you know, I think is stronger. While I don't want to give Zachary Levi points, I sadly have to give Zachary Levi points. I would say the winner here is First Date. Next up, we have Your Lie in April, which is based on the anime and the manga of the same name, versus The Little Mermaid. Oh, I wish this had an easier competitor. Oh, no. Okay, I'm just going to take a moment to speak about why I love Your Lie in April. I feel like Your Lie in April got done so dirty, right? It got done so dirty. I wish there was more love for that musical because I think it really did capture a very interesting slow build relationship. And the challenges of that and the tragedy that comes with it, it's so heartbreaking. I feel like the musical explores that so well. And I want to take this moment to give it its flowers, right? Because, you know, I do feel like it's going to be very hard to argue against The Little Mermaid. Because The Little Mermaid is one of the most beautiful love stories ever told, you know. Similar to the themes in What's in This Island, Disney's version of Little Mermaid is beautiful. You know, when I think of Disney love stories, it is Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid. Those are like the two that come to the forefront in my mind. Will I say that if those two were paired against each other, I do think the Beast is more interesting than Prince Eric is? Yes. But I love Ariel as a character. I love Her I Want song. Am I being biased because I think the music of Little Mermaid is great? Maybe. Alan Menken and Howard Ashman. Great pairing for the ages. R.I.P. Howard Ashman. But I come back to the question, do I think Your Lie in April is stronger? Or do I think The Little Mermaid is stronger? The thing is, I think there are really interesting ebb and flows in the relationship in Your Lie in April. But I would say just it is The Little Mermaid. But hey, we can go from one Howard Ashman and Alan Menken show to another. Next up, we have Little Shop of Horrors versus Pretty Woman. Pretty Woman was the first musical I thought of, right? And I feel like that has to give it points for something. I think when we're thinking of like rom-coms and romances taken to the stage, Pretty Woman is a great example. However, it does sadly have the quality of the musical question, and I don't love the Pretty Woman musical that much. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a very decent adaptation. But I feel like there's a lot of intimacy with Pretty Woman that I don't think it quite captures in that musical. Whereas Little Shop of Horrors, deal with the devil, all about a girl. Seymour wants the girl wants Seymour, but is stuck in an abusive relationship. So he feeds people to a plant. Didn't say it was a great idea. I mean, it worked for him a little bit, surprisingly. And I love Seymour and Audrey in the musical so much. Suddenly Seymour? Just look at Suddenly Seymour. Look at Suddenly Seymour. That's all you need to see. You know what? All I need to say, Suddenly Seymour. And I'm sending it through to the next round. There you go. Done. Next up, I had 31 suggestions, and I couldn't think of a 30-second one. I wanted to do She Loves Me, and I didn't have time to watch it. So I shoved in Anne Juliet last second. And I'm going to make an interesting case for why it counts for the criteria. Stick with me. Versus La La Land. La La Land, as the musical, is trying to capture that old school vibe. Is trying to capture the golden age of musicals and those romances that were found in them. You know, it's trying to do that for the music. It's trying to do that through the storyline, for the cinematography. And I don't know why La La Land is so, like, people either love La La Land or absolutely despise the ground it walks on. I don't know why it has such a vast difference in reception. And maybe it's because it's Damien Chazelle and I really like his work. You know, my favorite film is Whiplash, another one that he directed. Very different films. I really loved La La Land when it first came out with time and reflection. You know, there's little things that I don't think are perfect about it. But, you know, it's cute, and the relationship is cute, and I like the way that it ends. I like the way that relationship grows and fades away, and, you know, I think it is a great example. And Juliet, technically, I didn't put it on here at first because I felt like I could describe the musical without describing that relationship. And then I thought about Anne and Shakespeare. Because I think you can take the plot of Anne and Juliet and describe it as like, what's next for Juliet if she hadn't taken her life at the end of Romeo and Juliet? Where would she go? What would she do? But you can also phrase that plot as Shakespeare and Anne Hathaway's relationship is contrasted to Juliet and Romeo's. Because I think their rewriting of the story is what drives Anne Juliet. It is one of the only other examples on here where I'm going to speak about two couples. Because yes, you have Juliet and Romeo, and while that isn't the main plot point, Anne and Shakespeare are the entire time, and how they reshape Anne Juliet, and the voice that they give to Juliet, and the changes they make to Romeo as they're rewriting it together, says so much about that relationship. Could they go into more detail? Sure. Yes, I think there are places where they could, but I do love how they use that as the structure to make this, especially in a plot point, and I spoke about this a little bit in my recent review of the UK tour. You know, this is a plot that has been made fun of so much. You know, Romeo and Juliet 2, Romeo returns. Like that's been a joke for ages, and they actually managed to do it in a way that really does work. Is it cheesy in places? Absolutely, but I feel like it has enough substance to it that it works. Between these two, I would actually give it to Anne Juliet. Next up, we have a musical that's famous for a love story that doesn't work out, and a new British musical which I feel like is the epitome of a rom-com on stage. We have The Last 5 Years and Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York. Again, there's a lot of complexities to Jamie and Kathy in The Last 5 Years, especially because we see these love stories told in opposite directions. You know, the first thing we see of this musical is literally Kathy going, "It's over, it's done, f*** you, Jamie." And then Jamie runs in and goes, "I love you, let's go." But I think the way that the musical tells itself explores these two's relationship so wonderfully, going in these opposite directions, so you kind of get to see how the relationship fades and how it grew contrasted with each other. I really love the structure of this, and I think it's some of Jason Robert Brown's best work. And that's saying a lot, because Jason Robert Brown has done a lot of really, really good work. But I have such a softness for Two Strangers. And I feel like that softness might be the thing to push it through. Also because, you know, I like to champion new musicals on here. We got Benjamin Button. We got Your Lie in April, which, you know, didn't make as big of a splash as I would have liked it to. And Two Strangers, I really want to see this musical back. It's so beautiful. It's so well told. It somehow manages to tell like a Hallmark Christmas movie on stage and make it good. Dougal and Robin, you know, they start very contrasting. Their personalities don't seem like they would fit in the slightest bit. And I love that way that you see them slowly warm to each other. It's really fantastic. Which is stronger? I think in this instance, because I did West Side Story, I gave y'all West Side Story, right? I gave y'all that one. Can I have this one and send through Two Strangers? I love both of these. And I honestly wish this wasn't a first round pairing, because that's the sad thing. You know, I'm picking 32 musicals and I will have time to speak about all of them and how much I love them. But, you know, sometimes we lose them too early. And I feel like here we are definitely losing The Last 5 Years too early. But I'm going to give it to Two Strangers. I am going to give it to Two Strangers. We said romantic musical. And the romance is stronger in Two Strangers. There you go. There you go. I spun it round. I did it. Next up, we have Bonnie and Clyde versus Miss Saigon. Oh, okay. So obviously I spoke a little bit about Monsters Island, and I feel like the love story has a lot of parallels to Miss Saigon's. You know, it's two people kind of striking up a relationship and then that all going wrong. Only thing that might stop Miss Saigon going much further is that a lot of the musical doesn't really explore that relationship. A lot of the musical is Kim and her son. So can we really say it's the strongest romantic musical if not most of the conflict is about that love between Chris and Kim? I don't know. This is the question that we have to ask ourselves. We've got to make difficult decisions, and sometimes you have to ask difficult questions to get to it. We're not saying what is the better musical here. We're saying what is the better romantic musical, which has better romantic plot points. The quality of the musical can come in, and Miss Saigon is a musical of high quality. You know, some of the greatest music of all time. You cannot deny it. There's a lot you can say on the opposite side of that. And granted, a lot of people have, but, you know, the quality of the music is definitely high. Bonnie and Clyde, it won my bracket for couples, if I remember correctly, because Bonnie and Clyde are just a pair perfectly made for each other. And I love how the musical explores their relationship. You know, they're meeting, they're coming together, the way that Bonnie comes into herself so much with Clyde as well. Even if that's in a slightly different direction, how she stands her ground against Clyde as well. They both feel like they have a very strong stake in that relationship. Oh, people are going to be mad at me, but you know what? If we're speaking about the romance side of things, I would say Bonnie and Clyde is slightly stronger. Now, is that just me sitting here knowing more about Bonnie and Clyde than I do about Miss Saigon? Maybe. You know, I saw Miss Saigon ages ago, and I've listened to the music every now and then, but I do know Bonnie and Clyde a lot more. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's that. Maybe that little bit of bias is coming out, but that's fine. It's opinion. It's all subjective. I'm sitting through Bonnie and Clyde. I'm curious to see how people respond to that. We have Hadestown versus Hello Dolly. Hello Dolly is very interesting. I like how they build that relationship because it's all on Dolly. Dolly essentially spends that entire musical crafting the most absurd circumstances, this chain of events, so that eventually she can end up with the man she wants to marry. Is it love is the question, and maybe that's the thing that's going to lead Hadestown to push through. But again, with Hadestown, we have two different couples to talk about. Because I think the musical fundamentally contrasts and compares Orpheus and Eurydice and Hades and Persephone. I mean, I revisited Hadestown again last night with the OGs coming back, and it's like everything about that is so structured to compare these two. You think of a song like Epic 3, even like the challenge that Hades sets Orpheus is a parallel to how he has had to live. He has to send his love, the love of his life, up to the overworld for 6 months, not knowing if she's going to come back. And that's such a similar challenge that he ends up setting Orpheus, going, okay, you think we're similar, here you go. See if you could handle it. I love how the musical builds that. I love how the musical presents that. Hadestown is one of my favorite musicals, and I do love Hello Dolly. If I'm talking about old school musicals, Hello Dolly is one of my favorites. And I'm sad it's got such a tough challenger in the first round. But you know what? I'm giving it to Hadestown. And finally, for round one, we have The Time Traveler's Wife and Falsettos. We have our last queer relationship here because Falsettos, I'm going to be mainly speaking about Marvin and Whizzer. Obviously, this musical dives into his relationship with his son, his ex-wife, the lesbians from next door. But I think, especially when we get into Act 2, the fundamental central of this musical is Marvin and Whizzer. Them together, them fading apart, and then coming back together again. And the tragedy that befalls them later in Act 2. Falsettos is just... it's a fantastic musical. I'd love to see it come back again to the UK. I think the relationship between Marvin and Whizzer is always presented so humanly. Like, it's two people. They have arguments. They have ebbs and flows. They have arguments that end in big outbursts, and these can be relationship ending. You see these conflicts, and these conflicts are natural. These conflicts are things that happen to two people when they've been together for a long time. I think there's a real relatability to that. And I think, look at this list. I've spoken about, 28 musicals that center around straight couples, and about 3 that center around non-straight couples, that are centered around LGBTQ perspectives. These are not stories that are as commonly told, or are told, but are kind of pushed to the side a lot of the time. And I love this ebb and flow relationship. I love how real it feels. And of course, how that relationship builds for Act 2 and how it ends. It's heartbreaking. The Time Traveler's Wife is great. Again, similar to something like Benjamin Button, actually, where it's a pairing that would never be able to work out because of the condition that David Hunter's character is in. I've forgotten the character's name. Henry. Henry is his name. You see him pop in and out. He's here, there, everywhere. I love their relationship. I love how it builds. I love, like, even how they managed to do it with, like, the disjointed nature of it, with him popping up at different ages and at different points in her life. But I do love falsettos a lot, and I would give this one to falsettos. Okay, now we've gone through the first round, we can go through the rest of them really quickly, speed run, and find my winner. Guys and Dolls versus Beauty and the Beast. This is difficult because Beauty and the Beast is really, really strong, but I do like Guys and Dolls. I like how it compares those two relationships. But push me on it, twist my arm, and I probably would go with Beauty and the Beast here, actually. Yeah, let's give it to that. West Side Story versus Sunset Boulevard. Ooh. You know what? Maria and Tony. Maria and Tony all the way. I'll go with Maria and Tony all the way. Benjamin Button versus Phantom. I cannot undersell how well told the relationship is in Benjamin Button. And it's difficult because you have to make sure that that connection is palpable, because you need that audience on your side. Phantom versus Christine versus Raoul is great. I love the jealousy. I love the push and pull that Christine has. Tough. But, you know, it's just my personal opinion. Which has a better relationship is the question that I've got to push towards the front, which is a better romantic musical. And I would probably say Benjamin Button. I'm making difficult decisions today. The Prom versus Amelie. Oh, I love both, but you know what? I like a lot of the queer themes of The Prom. I would give it to The Prom. First Date versus Little Mermaid. I think this is very clearly Little Mermaid. I love First Date, and I love what it presents and what it brings, but The Little Mermaid, iconic. I'm not sure how much further The Little Mermaid would go because, you know, Eric as a character isn't as well defined as maybe he could be, especially with, like, the film version, but Ariel's picking up the slack. And the score as well. Oh my god. Little Shop of Horrors versus Anne Juliet. Ooh, because I didn't think Anne Juliet would be as much of a challenge, but when you picture it with the Shakespeare and Anne relationship, I think that does give it a lot of points. But I do love Seymour and Audrey. I love that relationship and suddenly Seymour. But I do feel like the musical itself is more about the deal with the devil, is more about the plot. And that is the plot point that you do focus on more. That is the thing. I will go with Little Shop of Horrors. I gave them both like a plus and a con. Yeah, let's go with Little Shop of Horrors. Which means, yep, next round we will be doing Alan Menken and Howard Ashman versus each other again. How fun. Two Strangers versus Bonnie and Clyde. Okay. Bonnie and Clyde presents a really interesting romance. Is it romantic, though? Because we got to remember, that's what we're thinking of. Is it a romantic musical? And I do think Two Strangers is more fundamentally a romantic musical. Which is a better romance? Probably Bonnie and Clyde, but which is, like, the one that is perfect for Valentine's Day? It is Two Strangers. And you know what? Bonnie and Clyde got their flowers last time. If I'm struggling between the two, I want to push up the one that hasn't had the chance. So I am going to give it to Two Strangers. And then Hadestown versus Falsettos. Please don't make me do it. Don't make me do it. Video ends now. Okay. Well, if you push me on it, I mean, maybe recency bias will mean that I say Hadestown, but I do like the parallels in that relationship. But Marvin and Wither feels so real. I like a little bit of grit in my relationships. I like the realism of it. I like how it's a flawed queer relationship, and, you know, how it presents it like that as well. I'm gonna regret this later about Hadestown. Oh, I'm going to regret this later about Hadestown. Okay, round 3. Beauty and the Beast versus West Side Story. You know, for a show that I struggled really so much to pitch against the cards, it's really trucking its way through, because I am, honestly, gonna go through these quickly, and I am leaning more towards West Side Story. Benjamin Button, The Prom. I knew we weren't gonna have an LGBTQ couple in the semi-final, but it's okay. Benjamin Button, I think, is absolutely beautiful, and I love The Prom. I love what it does. I love Emma and Alyssa in that musical, but the will they, won't they in Benjamin Button, and the flow of that relationship, the coming and going, oh, I love it so much. I will give it to Benjamin Button. Recency bias? Maybe. But I love that musical. Little Mermaid, Little Shop of Horrors. Which Howard Ashman and Alan Menken show do I like more? And which presents the romance more strongly? You know what? I'm going to give this to Little Shop of Horrors. I'm going to explain it by the fact I'm going to use the Eric card here. He's not that interesting. I'm sorry. I don't know. You cannot make me care for that man. Whereas, Audrey and Seymour, both as characters, I feel a lot more of an attachment to, while I feel like the musical as a whole is not as focused on that. Everything happens in that musical because of the plant, and I like that relationship a little bit more. So taking in that factor, taking in my thoughts on Little Shop of Horrors and how much I love that musical, I am going to push through Little Shop of Horrors. Two Strangers, Hadestown. Okay, this is where it gets really, really hard, because I could send both of these through and be absolutely okay. Two Strangers, I think, is one of the most perfect romance musicals of all time. The rom-com vibes are so perfect, the slow burn of the relationship, it's those hallmark vibes that they perfect so well. But also Hadestown, the contrast of those two relationships, I could see every single reason why you would want to push for Hadestown. And I do. I want to send it through. Honestly, I feel like the top 4 should probably be these two up instead of Little Shop of Horrors. But this is how the cookie crumbles. This is how you gotta do it in the versus brackets. And right now in the versus bracket, I am gonna send through Two Strangers. Is that the gag of the season? Is that the surprise? Is that the one that everyone's going to scream at me in the comments for? Probably not. I've made some hard decisions here today. But here we go. Now, I have added a special little thing for this bracket as well, because we have, for the first time ever, a third place. So we are going to do the semi-finals, and then the losers of both semi-finals will versus each other to find our third place winner. Sometimes we've got to add a little bit of spice to the format. If you guys enjoy this, I'll keep on doing it. And if you guys hate it, I won't. Tell me your thoughts on this twist in the comments down below. But first up, we have West Side Story and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I did not expect these two. I mean, especially because I really wanted Lacage. And I think Lacage would have got here. Would Lacage have beaten Benjamin Button, though, is my other question. And that is a difficult question. But I think it's undeniable the quality of West Side Story. I think it's undeniable the quality of Maria and Tony's relationship in that. But you know what I'm looking for in a musical. You know what I'm looking for in a romance. I want a little bit of spice. I want the tragedy. And I do think West Side Story brings me the tragedy, but I want some more ebbs and flows. I want some ups and downs. We have these moments of tension in the relationship that the West Side Story definitely presents, but I do feel a lot more of that in Benjamin Button. We cannot undersell either of these, I feel, because these are both very good, but push me. And you know what? I do feel like it is right that West Side Story takes its place in the finale. It's hard. I can at least be okay in the fact that whichever one I don't pick will win third place, and that's fine. But then again, we could have a double British musical finale. How many times do we get to have a double British musical finale if I send through Benjamin Button? I have to make a decision, and I've got to make it now. And I want to send through Benjamin Button. I will be very bluntly clear with that. I want to send through Benjamin Button, but I have to say that I love West Side Story too. I would feel wrong if I didn't send through West Side Story, and that is not a slate on Benjamin Button at all. I could send either of these through. It hurts me equally, but I would say I'm sending through West Side Story. And the other side, Little Shop of Horrors, Two Strangers. I did not expect Little Shop of Horrors. I think we had a lot of the really hard ones, all culminated together. I think the relationship between Seymour and Audrey is such a driving factor of Little Shop of Horrors. I think it is some of the lifeblood of Little Shop of Horrors, some of the blood that is being fed to the plant. But, I love that. I love that relationship. They're so perfect for each other as well. And the way the musical lines you up to root for these two as a pairing as well. I like how it's not all black and white with that relationship as well. Erin is a horrible, horrible person. Does he deserve to be fed to a hungry plant? I don't think you can be that mad at Seymour for something like this. Audrey is legitimately suffering. I love how it handles this. But then again, Two Strangers, I think, again, if I'm thinking of romantic musicals, I think of the rom-com vibes and I think of Two Strangers. And I feel like that is what's going to send Two Strangers through to the next round. I think a lot of these are romantic musicals, but I don't think any other ones of these really captured that vibe for me. And I want that vibe in the finale. So I will send through Two Strangers to the finale. So we have our final pairings all set up. So before we do our finale, let's talk runner-up, we have The Curious Case of Benjamin Button versus Little Shop of Horrors. And I think it's very clear what I would like to make as my runner-up. My honorary finale pick is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, a fantastic love story. Doomed from the start, you know it, but everything the musical does just means you want it to work out more and more and more. I love it to bits. It is my third place, with Little Shop of Horrors being a very strong fourth. And finally, we come to our final pairing. Let me know in the comments which one between these two you would pick. But it has come to this. Not the pairing I really expected, but we have West Side Story versus Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York, which is the best romantic musical. I've said a lot today about West Side Story. You know, it's beaten a lot of my favorites. It's beaten Lacage, it's beaten Benjamin Button, and I love Maria and Tony. And then there's Two Strangers. You know how much I love supporting new British musicals, and Two Strangers, I feel like, is such a wonderful example of that. The music of it is fantastic. The storyline is so fun, and I want it back so much. I think, you know, sticking to the criteria and thinking of what I'm looking for in a romantic musical on Valentine's Day, you know, if, you know, I wasn't so painfully single, what I would take my partner to see, thinking about the quality of the musical, thinking about the iconography, thinking about everything, I would say right now, I would give it to Two Strangers. It's a wild choice. I know, but it feels right. It feels right. You know, I can't fight my gut. It's my gut I can't ignore. I shouldn't make a Hadestown reference. That went out too early. It's very difficult. And honestly, I could change my mind. I could change my mind another day. Maybe this is the wrong decision. Maybe y'all in the comments would be like, Ellie, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? But you know what? I'm thinking romantic musicals. I'm thinking pairings that work so well. And I'm so endeared by a pairing like Dougal and Robin. I'm so endeared by them. They're such a wonderful pair. So while West Side Story has loads of great quality about it, I mean, like, compared to Score, and like, definitely West Side Story is stronger in a lot of cases, but we're taking a lot of other things into account, and I would give it to Two Strangers on this day. But what do you think? As I said, these brackets are always so subjective. I'm making quick and difficult decisions that I may regret when I come to edit it, but I have to stick to what I've said. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What is your winner? Which musicals do you love that are romantic and have romantic themes that weren't on this bracket? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on screen right now, and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. So I have other social links and a merch store in the description down below. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.